All right. Hello, everyone. It's time. Today, we're going to be arguing about the Blood Pact. So, the I guess, as usual, I guess, for these kinds of things, I have prepared a couple of slides. To make sure everyone is caught up on the same page, have all the information that we need to make this have a conversation and discussion about the Blood Pact, a famous bit of writing in Radiant Dawn that is often criticized for it being bad. I've seen many people say that this is perhaps one of the stupidest writing decisions in Radiant Dawn, and that it killed the game for them. But thing is that whenever people say that, they're always extremely non-specific about what exactly is bad about it. And I think that's I don't know. I think for one, obviously, when you're just saying that something's bad, it's always easy to just say it's bad, but it's not so easy to say why it's bad. And today I'd like to look into exactly all of the possible reasons why it would be bad. We can't see me? Oh yeah, I don't have anything up yet. I'm just talking before I get into the slides. So yeah, the goal of today's stream, hopefully, is to talk with a lot of people about why they have problems with the Blood Pact. So first, let's go over some background material, and then we can get into the discussion. So, let's argue about the Blood Pact. I guess this is kind of like instead of a let's play, this is a let's argue. So I'm not sure there's something with that, right? Yeah, for everyone that's talking in the chat right now, I fortunately will not be able to read whatever you're typing. Feel free to paste it down later when we actually get to the particular points that you're talking about. So, let's argue about the Blood Pact. Was it really that bad? Is it a plot contrivance, or was it needed, or was it something else, right? What else could have been done with it? But, what? Okay. Wait a second. I think, hold on a second. As it turns out, when you load up slides, it doesn't necessarily do in the order that you want it to. So give me a second. All right. Yeah. But unfortunately, by clicking on this stream, you have signed a Blood Pact. You have to like and subscribe, or your entire country will perish. I hate to say it. You sign the document. Yeah. You do the crime. You do the time. You fool. You absolute buffoon. You Tell you still the last promise? Ah, fuck. That was this one. Yeah, on a second. There we go. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, as it turns out, you have made a foolish decision. You have doomed your entire country. All right. Anyway, so what is the Blood Pact? So, the Blood Pact is a magical contract between two individuals, which, when signed in blood, binds a signatory to the terms of the pact. This is typically a master-servant relationship. I guess, technically speaking, it's possible for there to be other terms, but most of the time it's used by the master of the contract to trick a party unaware of the consequences into being basically their servant, their slave, it's basically complete obedience. It seems that the Blood Pact does not necessarily have to do that, but in all practical purpose where it is used, that's what it's for. It's used to trick someone who's unaware of it into basically dooming themselves and their entire country. There are three main uses of the Blood Pact in Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn. The first being Pelleas, who was tricked into signing the Blood Pact disguised as a Benyon Treaty. It was signed by a Kilvis king many years ago, who signed it for military assistance in reclaiming his country. It's not certain. It's not shown exactly when that happens. And there's one signed by Ashnard, who whose signing was orchestrated by Ashnard. He found some random wandering guy who was able to produce a blood pact, and he tricked his father into signing it, which randomly killed everyone, randomly killed people in Dayan until everyone ahead of him in line was dead, and so he used that to seize the throne. I think strange. I'm not exactly sure, but I think Ashnard would have actually been a valid target for this. So he just kind of like gambled it, right? He just bet that everyone else in his family would die before he would. Which is, I guess, that's like an Ashnard move. That's in character, but damn, that seems like a very, very poor strategy, right? Like imagining like betting that everyone, like that, like 20 other people would die randomly before you would. Wasn't the random watering guy Sephiran? That is a theory, but there's no proof for it. His son could have died. I don't think his son existed at that point. Anyway, okay, so what does the Blood Pact do? So pretty much the most Blood Pact terms are basically complete obedience or die. And the way that the death is inflicted is that upon violating the terms of the pact's holder can invoke a curse. And so basically after an increasing number of random people from the country will die every day until everyone in the country is dead. So it'll be day 1 deaths, day 2 deaths, day n deaths, for a total number of deaths of n times n plus 1 divided by 2. If anyone's ever done competition math, you're very familiar with this formula. So if you think about it this way, the rate of death from the Blood Pact is actually surprisingly slow. I think many more people die. Actually, granted, Radiant Dawn doesn't exactly have the best scalings or like numbers. Like sometimes they just throw numbers around, and a lot of times the number of people in each country doesn't make much sense. Anyway, whatever. But this is just what they say in the game, and I guess I think we can operate under the assumption that this is a devastating effect. So the details. So the servant of the Blood Pact is marked with a symbol on their arm, and the death of the servant of the Blood Pact merely results in the Blood Pact being transferred to a next leader in line. And that's why Naysala is marked with the Blood Pact. That's because the succession of Kilva's kings, they just kept dying from natural causes or whatever, and then the curse would be passed on to the next in line, which would eventually be Naysala. And so that's why Naysala is affected by the Blood Pact there. So, breaking the Blood Pact, the Blood Pact can be broken if one of the original parties is killed and the document itself is destroyed. Anyway, let's see. But like, it's a plot point in the story that if only the servant is killed, it just transfers onto the next person, and nothing works, right? I guess it would first require that pretty much any breaking of the Blood Pact requires that the document itself be destroyed. Is a paper just indestructible if both are alive? No, the document is always destructible. But it seems that I'm not exactly sure about the sequence of events, but this is how the story portrays it, and I guess it's just taken as fact. So the general role of the Blood Pact in the story is that it's a main driving force between the two player-controlled forces, Ike and Micaiah, from the middle of Part 3 until the end of Part 3, but it ceases to be a factor from Part 4 onwards. Couldn't the Blood Pact be avoided if there's no successor? I think in that case, it would still pick the next best successor through some arbitrary magical means, right? Micaiah was not next in line for the Dayan throne, but she was definitely next, like technically like the next obvious leader for Dayan. So the Blood Pact also provides a role, like a rationale for Nasala's betrayal in earlier part 3, and it's an explanation for how Ashnod rose to the throne. These are the 3 major story roles of the Blood Pact. But it seems like there are also a couple of loopholes that are explicitly mentioned in the game, mostly in combat conversations. I guess there's 2 that are used. One is that it seems the Blood Pact, at least the one that is written for Dayan, is binding between countries. So I guess they mentioned that earlier in the game, somewhere in the game, they mentioned that just killing Lakain would not be enough because he could hand it off to someone else. But I guess then that also leaves the problem of where, since it's bound between countries, then a higher authority can overrule it. And so Nesala mentions that since he's by taking orders from Sanaki, he's able to not violate the terms of the Blood Pact. But it also seems that leaving the country itself also prevents you from being affected by the pact. Not necessarily leaving like physically, but like leaving on a allegiance manner, right? When Zahark and Joe join the Grill Mercenaries, there is dialogue that explicitly mentions that they are not affected by the pact. I'm not sure. This is something I've read in the English version, but it's not something I know if it exists in the later versions. And also, being turned into stone will prevent the Blood Pact from killing anyone because it seems that statues cannot die. This is a major plot point because it's what's used to essentially nullify the Blood Pact from being a factor after Part 3. It's basically the Blood Pact only really matters in Part 3. It's not really a big deal in any other part of the story. So, now we can start discussing things. Is this bad writing? What do you guys think? Rennie was like, I think overall people have a negative opinion of the Blood Pact, but is this bad writing? I guess we could do a poll. It's worse in the Japanese version. Interesting. I've seen that pace. I've seen that around why, but at the same time, why? What specifically about it is worse in the Japanese version? Yeah, I see a bunch of people. I'm gonna tally down some of the more notable comments here. Give me a second, and I'll write things down as you guys speak. It's so. What about? I hear there is a bit different in the Japanese version, but what specifically is worse in the Japanese version? That would be. I would like to know because I'm not. I don't. I haven't. I can't read Japanese, so reading into the Japanese text or looking at Japanese cutscenes is a bit difficult, right? So I'm seeing a couple of things. It removes agency from characters. It's probably written. It's very clumsy. It's forced. It's questionable. I would prefer a cheapens Nasala, Moro Granus. What else is there? It's a weak motivation, so it's a weak motivation for a fight, or conflict. How are the bound people affected? Okay, so the terms and mechanics are unclear. The Blood Pact doesn't even have to be as powerful as the game claims. Yeah, I guess it is kind of overpowered, right? The Blood Pact was like a last minute decision. You're gonna have to cite a source on that because it seems to be intricately weaved into many parts of the game. So like a lot of the CGs in Radiant Dawn are about the Blood Pact. It's a reason for Ike and Micaiah to fight, but it's not compelling. We prefer to have more They would have preferred to have more. Okay. What else is there? It's only bad because they put as much effort. They didn't put as much effort into it as they did the rest of the story. The magical effects are too convenient, and they're unfair. It's sprung on the player, and it's too much of a surprise. What else is there? It's kind of weird in universe. How and why does it kill n+1 people? Yeah, like how does it work? Like fucking magnets, how do they work? It prevents Makai from having a real conflict. What makes something compelling? Why is it not compelling? Well, I mean that's even less of an argument than I don't know. I guess I would prefer that if anyone makes a statement that they be a bit more detailed. You don't think so? Because real life, powerful nations force weaker nations into unequal treaties all the time. That's true, but I guess here, it is disproportionately powerful. What else? To be fair, Banyan is established to have done research into magic. I think it's the thing is that this is also like historically, like it goes way back in the past. It seems it's actually a bit unclear when exactly the Blood Pact was invented. But okay, it feels inconsistent with general Fire Emblem lore. What do you mean inconsistent? I'd like to know more. I guess it's not something that happens in other games, right? You wish it was actually important at Act 4. Oh yeah, I guess like it kind of like it's like a flash in the pan. Like it's a sudden motivation, and then it like stops mattering. What else? Problem is that Pelleas is dumb. I have some objections to that statement. Okay, so most contract devil stories have contract prey on the character's vices, but this one is just like completely in the dark, so it's devoid of moral content. Yes, devoid like of a typical like framing of a contract, right? Right, of a contract, right? Pretty much every time everyone does the blood pact, it is a trick. I guess that is pretty bad. Yeah, I guess it's not bad. It just that explains some things. It's weird to be tricked into signing something in blood when that's not normal way to sign something. That is true, yeah. But I guess maybe I guess, yeah, that's true. Yeah, signing in blood isn't normal. What else? Your only problem is that apparently Sonic keep taking your place as Empress, and Nisala claims that the Sanders are overruled. Yeah, the loopholes are something that are interesting to talk about. We'll talk about that later. It's kind of crazy that simple paper can kill people when you need an entire book to do magic. Maybe it's really thick paper, but yeah, it's honestly not how it's giga magic. It's because it causes the character to twiddle their thumbs and makes it so their morality is hard to question. Yeah, lack of agency. Grayness. It makes Makai do horrible things, and you're supposed to still treat her like a saint, because she had to. Removes responsibility. I don't know. I don't feel like Micaiah did that many bad things. I guess the worst thing she did was fight in a war, and the second one was try to burn a child. But I think everyone that's all right. It gives big conquest Valor Crystal Ball energy. Interesting. I think the Valor Crystal Ball is even worse, but okay. They had to get something into Makai to spearhead something, even if you really did not want to. Yeah. Does it get signed in actual blood, or is that just a name? I don't know. Signing in blood isn't normal. You've been duped a couple of times. What kind of contracts are you signing, man? The only other YouTube to discuss the Blood Pact is Jonin Monkey. I have no idea what that is. When I search Blood Pact, all the videos I get are my own recent videos. So we don't need magical killing paper to achieve something normal blackmail might do. Blackmail versus Blood Pact. You're thinking Makai should have tried to fight against Pelleas instead of just going along with him. Yeah, I guess there is like a weird like period of like not questioning anything. The problem is that it's framed like Pelleas was tricked instead of being forced into it. He was forced into it, be seen in a better light. I think the whole point of it is a trick, right? I guess it is cheap because like the whole Blood Pact is dependent on it being hidden knowledge and a trick. Now that I think about it, like when you think of a contract, you think of like someone like mentioned earlier, deal with the devil kind of thing. The Blood Pact is dumb because writing any contract in a world with magic is without knowing the full extent of your actions a dumb move. Possibly, but I think Radiant Dawn, like Path of Pelleas, the Pelleas, there just has no like other history of binding contracts like that. As a novice author, it's a wonky way to get to the end point of these characters are fighting for reasons. Yeah, I mean, it is a plot device. My issue is that it seems so contrived. The magic effects are so specific that it feels like one of those kid imaginary games where a kid goes, "I go invisible except for when I want to be seen." So it's contrived because like it's extremely specific effects. It's a 14-minute discussion about the Blood Pact 8 years ago. Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. You'd rather see, I guess, maybe like people feel robbed of like a better imagined story, right? Like people wanted a political thriller, Game of Thrones, but then they had this right. 66% yes, 34% no. Okay, that's a bit those numbers are a bit better than I thought they would be. The existence of the contract works against the tragedy of Ashnar becoming king by purely chance. I don't know. I think that's actually pretty funny that Ashnar just kind of rolled the dice 30 times to make in the hopes that he would not die first when he killed everyone in the country randomly, but it's not mentioned. So maybe there was some exception, but I find that actually to be like I think that actually enhances the story because it just shows how much of a mad lad Ashnard is. What the Benyan Senate hired the girl. Wait, it feels like Benyan should be able to power enough. Feels like Benyan should be powerful enough to strong arm all the countries, even without having to resort to a magical MacGuffin. Yeah. Can we assume that the signer of the contract is exempt from the random deaths? I think the issue is that in the first case, Ashnar didn't sign the contract, right? His father did. So what he did was he was still like, I'm assuming he was still Prince of Dayan at the time. So I think there's a lot of unexplained factors actually, right? Unexplained factors, some logical inconsistencies. Yeah, I think Ashnar's blood pact makes a lot of sense. It's just that for the other two, then we have problems, right? Like I feel like if they left the blood pact as purely a background setup for how Ashnar rose to the throne, then I think no one would have a problem with it, right? The mechanics like aren't that nearly as big of a deal as the story consequences for the others, right? But there's also the fact that like a contract that affects people who are not the people who sign it is a bit strange, right? Because they should have just done an engage and give Micaiah Vale's Kaga helmet. All right, seeing Sonica and Nasal interact is funny. It kind of makes it worth it. It's a little bit OP. I think Ashnar ran out of patience with Blood Pact and killed their father himself. There's another. All right. What's Pelleas gain from the blood contract anyway? Nothing, pretty much. I think he just got tricked into signing a piece of paper, and then the piece of paper was wham, wham, bam. You have been tricked into signing a blood pact. I think I had a slide for that. Yeah. By clicking on the stream, you have signed a blood pact. Like and subscribe, or entire country will perish. I guess those of you who were watching 20 minutes ago already saw this one, but that's basically exactly what happened, right? He clicked the Disney Plus terms and service conditions, then he got fucked, right? That's basically what happened. He had no chance. That's pretty much what like the basic conceit of it. He was set up to fail entirely. Does Pelleas need a reason to not trust Benyan? Well, I mean, they were literally the occupying force. I think the actual the specific circumstances was that Benyan presented a treaty under the guise of paying reparations to Dayan, right? They were getting money, but then like they hid this like in like they hid this underneath the other contract, and it just got them. All right. So yeah, I think I've seen a bunch of reasons. I think a lot of these are reasons I've anticipated. So I have some slides for them. So I guess we can talk about them all in detail, right? You don't think Pelleas is stupid? He's just really misguided. I think he was set up to never actually ever have a chance, because thing is that anyone in Pelleas' circumstances, not knowing that the Blood Pact existed, they would not be capable of defending against it, right? But we'll get into that. If Pelleas is no longer king, does the contract just stop working? Who knows? All right. So, yeah, I guess I hope that just saying yes to is the Blood Pact bad? That's a boring answer. And if you do that, you're a coward for being incapable of expressing exactly why. But I'm sure I see many of you are not cowards. Many of you are very have been provided very detailed explanations, which I think are very interesting. But I think I kind of hate it whenever people just say it's bad because it's like it's bad, or it's a contrivance, or it's cringe or something, because that I feel like 95% of the time people criticizing things don't actually read to the things that they're criticizing, and that people being lacking in their explanations is a sign of that. All right. So people say that it's a contrivance, but why specifically is it a contrivance? I guess we can go to a bunch of rules, right? So it forces a conflict where there really never should have been one. I think let's talk about it this way, right? So I think Ike versus Micaiah, strictly speaking, has no reason to happen aside from magic, right? And I guess the problem here is that a confrontation where nobody is at fault kind of feels cheap. So I think what people so why is this bad, right? I guess the thing is that people were envisioning in their own head a different story which was better, that where everything ends up mattering, right? I guess we can try to think of reasons why Micaiah would want to fight Ike, right? But then in a way that isn't a complete misunderstanding, and in a way that doesn't make us hate Micaiah, right? That's the thing, right? Because they're both protagonists. They're both meant to be in the right, but I think it's basically impossible to have two people in the right that are fighting for a very extended period of time without it being like a misunderstanding that's cleared up, right? Because that's basically what happens here. The whole point, yeah. It feels like the third act of a friendship breakup in the kids movie. They're fighting just because the story just pushes it. Personally, you think that it's cool that's not a one-off? Yeah, I think the fact that it appears no less than 3 times in the story means it isn't like. I guess when we find out about it, it's sprung upon us. But I guess the whole point of the Blood Pact is that it's secretive. Like, it doesn't work if you know about it. I mean, again, I guess that, but that's still a kind of a feel bad thing, right? Where you lose agency. But I guess I don't know. I feel like not having agency is just like real life, right? Imagine like you get like suddenly like surprise attacked, and your country is invaded and you get killed, right? But you didn't know about it. So is that like a lack of agency? Is Crimea like in FE9 being invaded by Dayan suddenly a lack of agency on Crimea's part? Yes, but like do people hate that specifically? Not really, right? Like, there's something else. There's other stuff to it. Was it shown in the game that the Blood Pact actually had any power? We'll get to that. And I think so, yes, actually. Because Micaiah uses her foresight, her magical ability to see the future, that she confirms it with foresight. Though actually, I'm not actually personally, I'm not exactly sure if foresight is actually real or if it's literally just Yune telling her things. Because the foresight, I guess we can talk about. I don't talk about it in the slides, but Micaiah's power or foresight is exactly the same ones, the same power of hearing the goddess's voice that the Benyon apostles have, right? If it forewarns them of disaster, I think there's sufficient evidence to suggest that that is pretty much what it is, right? So it's either Yune or just her like apostle powers because she is the older sister of Sanaki and the oldest daughter of the apostle that previously died. I mean, of the previous line, right? So all in all, that like there is like sufficient reason to assume that is not a bluff. But yeah, the fact that like it is like the no fault confrontation is cheap, right? And I think it's more than that. It's not just it being a no fault confrontation. It's a no fault confrontation that lasts for like 9 chapters, right? It's chapter 6 through chapter 3-13 through the end game, right? It just keeps happening, and I think that part is just like a little. I mean, come on, man, right? The fact that it's drawn out, well, it's basically the entire. It's like 3/4 of the part 3 conflict makes it really a little annoying, right? Where there we have this extended no fault conflict where like thousands of people die, right? I think they explicitly mentioned that like Micaiah like kills like a lot of people in the Royal Knights and the Benyan armies. They mentioned that they're completely obliterated. That Ike mentions that he has lost thousands of Crimean Royal Knights, right? Yeah. So yeah, one another common objection is that it makes Pelleas into an idiot. I would like to make a counterpoint. Pelleas is portrayed as an idiot. He is portrayed as a fool, as someone who is clearly not up to the task. That's like the whole point of his character. That's why his theme is like so sad, right? Right. Let me bring up Pelleas's theme, right? It's called his track is called Sorrowful King Pelleas, right? I guess you wouldn't know that in the like well, you wouldn't know that in the game, right? But this might be a bit too loud. And let me bring up the track. I need to mute it so it doesn't actually. Wait, I can do it with desktop audio. Yeah, so like this, like come on. When your track is this, right? Like if this is your track, right? I think like you know that Pelleas is a tragic character and he's screwed from the beginning, right? So yeah, I don't think it's bad because it assassinates Pelleas' character because it doesn't assassinate Pelleas' character. Sorry about the noise. Oh shit. Okay, that played a bit more accidentally than I wanted it to. Really sorry about that. Yeah. Anyway, Pelleas' theme, it does not assassinate his character because his character has already been assassinated by it's not well rather that is his character that he is a he is pathetic and incapable, right? Yeah, I think like here's the music but less loud, right? Like we know that like it doesn't make Pelleas into an idiot because Pelleas is an idiot, right? And I think even with that, he never had a chance from the beginning because, for one, he had no knowledge of the Blood Pact. Like, and anyone in his position would have been screwed over in the same way, right? You think the Blood Pact acts to Pelleas' character? The Blood Pact is like 95% of his character, I think. Right? Yeah, it's this Soul of Cinder's music, man. I think someone mentioned that the Blood Pact is bad because it becomes the de facto best military strategy. Possibly. I think I would disagree because if anyone knows about it, it is completely ineffective. How are you going to get a king to sign your blood contract when he knows that signing a blood contract can get his entire country enslaved, right? Pelleas is meant to be an XP of Lion. I don't know. I think he's meant to be like a foil of the typical blue-haired Fire Emblem protagonist, right? You know, like exiled prince, discovered and goes back to reclaim his country. He follows the hallmarks of a typical Fire Emblem protagonist, but instead of actually being supported, he's like set up to fail at every turn, and he's also completely incapable of living up to the actual expectations of his subjects. So like, Pelleas is like meant to be a foil to like the typical Marth leader protagonist guy, right? He's like if they threw the typical Fire Emblem protagonist and made all of his circumstances the worst possible ones that there could be. All right, not bad writing because he played extremely straight. It doesn't feel like the writers are forcing conflict, as it feels like Lacane is forcing conflict. Pelleas is us. All right, let's take away the sad music. It's making this bit dramatic. He's kind of a foil to Micaiah. Interesting. But yeah, if you deserve Medea, does the contract still kill you? It is not real. It doesn't really seem like it does, and that's another problem that we can talk about in a bit. Why should the Blood Pact affect me? I never voted for Pelleas. Yeah, I think like there's a lot that could have been done that I feel like they didn't explore. But I guess the thing is that a lot of the dialogue that we see, right, could have been written independently from the actual main story. That happens a lot, right? For instance, like I don't know about Radiant Dawn possibly, but boss conversations, they might expose lore, but they aren't necessarily always consistent with the broader story. But we can think about Blood Pact exploits a bit later. How would the Blood Pact work in a democratic nation? I mean, like maybe it works like how it does in Chainsaw Man, or like where Bill Clinton can sacrifice a year off of everyone's lives to like pay the gun devil to kill someone, right? I think it just seems like there's like a big importance placed on nations for some reason that's not really given in other parts, right? It's not Dayan, that's East Dayan. Yeah, like if Micaiah like just led a revolution and like made like the principality of like West Dayan or East Dayan, then maybe that could have saved things. But who knows, right? But I don't know. I feel like Radiant Dawn wasn't too concerned about questions like what is a country, right? And just decided to go with that. All right. I think another part about the Blood Pact is that it's kind of people say like it's OP, it's unfair. And I think that's true, right? Because it doesn't make sense how just signing just signing a piece of paper kills your entire country. I think that it is like exceedingly overpowered. I agree. Right. And it's kind of weird that there aren't other things of comparable power in the setting. You think the Blood Pact doesn't excuse anyone? Micaiah is judged for her tactics. Nisala still commits himself to atonement after everything he did. Yeah, but I think it's the fact that like it's like signing up for Disney Plus, right? You sign up for Disney Plus and then you die of like a food allergy at a restaurant. Now you have no recourse, right? That's basically the degree of like it's like arbitration, I guess, right? In these terms of services, right? The Blood Pact being authority dependent implies that all important people have some kind of a holy blood and thus are immune to this magic. Yeah, I guess it is kind of weird how the Blood Pact, like, I guess granted, this is not uncommon in Fire Emblem, right? The importance of like royal blood is a theme that is common throughout the games, right? We see this in Engage. Sombron explicitly needs royal blood. We see this in FE4, which is all about holy blood. We see this in like this is literally a core theme of the series. I don't think that's an arguable point. But I think here it's like strange that the only time that the royal blood actually matters is for, I guess, tradition and for the specific like pact which kills you if you are part of a country that where some guy pressed yes on the terms and services, right? Yeah, I think the fact that blood in FE10, like royal blood, doesn't matter except for this blood point. This blood point, this plot point is important in factoring why it feels a bit contrived, right? He's like, yeah, Pelleas says you have royal blood. That's true. He's just some guy. Now that I think about it, it's not even royal blood. It's just like a position. There's no like magical coronation effect, right? It's leading the country, but that's strange. Yeah, it's kind of strange how there's this hyper specific contract magic that specifically targets the king, even without like some kind of like other identifier, right? The Blood Pact is just the Fire Emblem version of the human Sentai pad from South Park. Yes, yes, that is pretty much it. All right. Okay, we can talk about the next point. So I guess another point that some people bring up is why don't they just call it a bluff, right? But I think that's not really. I think it's easy to miss, but when they mention like after they discover the Blood Pact, Micaiah uses her foresight to tell us in no uncertain terms that if they disobey Benyan, they will enact the Blood Pact and people will die, right? I think, granted, Micaiah's foresight is not an ability that really is actually particularly prominent in the story. You know what I mean? So I feel like this explanation might be a bit lacking for people, right? There's no like game mechanic for foresight, right? I guess if they remake Radiant Dawn, they would probably rework foresight into like divine pulse, and then it'll make more sense. Possibly, she just saves coming futures. Um, but I think like if you read the story, it is like it's sufficiently explained why it isn't a thing, right? But I guess there's also the fact that Queen Almeida, as like a direct uh, witness to the last time the Blood Pact was effectively used by Ashnard, she knows that it works. She knows that it's true, and her rationale for not explaining it earlier does make sense, right? We saw in action a couple of times. She realized she had to go back and save the kid from Benyan troops, even if it got more people killed. Yeah, there's like a couple of times where it comes into play, but it's not really that prominent of a story, right? Of a story point compared to like, I guess even like her special abilities are a bit strange in that like they don't actually end up mattering that much. They're just like, I guess it makes sense because she's a figurehead. Like sacrifice is not as a game mechanic matters like once. And it's not used later, right? Micaiah doesn't use sacrifice like heal. Like I don't remember if she even uses to heal anyone after the kid, right? The Blood Pact should have been foreshadowed in Path of Radiance. I'm not sure. I don't know. I feel like it's. I guess like maybe like it could have been better if the Blood Pact was introduced to the player, but not the characters in some way. But at the same time, like it's not like I feel like there's like a whole bit of mystery from chapter 6 through like 12 about like what Pelleas' deal is. Is he betraying the country? Like he's very closed about it. Like you don't actually find out about the Blood Pact until like the very end of part 3. And the whole point of a lot of part 3 is that like what am I even fighting for kind of thing, right? You like the idea that it's who everyone thinks who the ruler is. Yeah, so I guess we can I guess yeah, I don't know. I don't know how the fact that the Blood Pact's like ruler choosing mechanics doesn't necessarily like make sense or like there's no like hard fast rules. I guess like when maybe there's just like a guy. There's just like a Blood Pact genie out there that's deciding all the things. I guess you can you can voice off the responsibility of that, right? All right. I think another thing we mentioned is like in addition to the Blood Pact being unfair, it's also kind of like it is OP. The power scaling makes no sense. Like, there's nothing comparable in the setting except maybe a Shara turning everyone to stone, right? There's nothing else in the setting that can affect so much damage over such a large distance, over such a long period of time, aside from literally like the goddess turning everyone into stone. Yune fighting the world. That's another one, yeah. But yeah, it's like it's completely overpowered compared to everything else in the setting. It doesn't make sense why yeah. Can it beat Goku though? Can Goku beat the Blood Pact curse? I don't know. Isn't like Goku like a sovereign citizen or something? Do you think it will affect you if you're a sovereign citizen? If you're like adhered by like admiralty law, do you think? And you state that you don't owe allegiance to the country. I think that might actually work. That's the thing, right? Because for the people that betray Dayan, they are not affected by the curse anymore. So actually being a sovereign citizen would mean you cannot be killed by the Blood Pact. What if the Blood Pact just a play that happened to hit the country at the same time and no one wanted to call the bluff? I mean, I think we know for a fact that it does work, right? Goku lost to a heart virus to COVID-19. Can Goku beat? All right, no. Blood Pact ruins Nesala. All right. Okay. Yeah, I think another thing we can talk about is the Blood Pact's origins and mechanics. They don't make any sense, right? It's like, why does it exist? Who the hell made this thing, right? Like, there's hints that the person who gave it to Ashnard's father, there's hints that it was Sephiran, right? Possibly, but there's also like history of it being used by Benyan on a Kilvas king, right? Before Sephiran, like the timeline doesn't really make sense, right? Like, why specifically is it about a country, right? Like, and why specifically does it target a country? Like, why does the king signing affect everyone inside the country? Is the country like a coherent unit as like divinely ordained? That doesn't make any sense, right? The Blood Pact should make the Empire rule the whole world. I mean, the problem is that they already do, right? I mean, the Benyan basically already does rule most of the known world. I guess the main problem is that like against like some I know why. I know why. The Lagoos, when they're transformed, they don't have thumbs, so they can't do the thumbprint to sign in blood. That's why they can't be hit by the Blood Pact. That's why Benyan has so much trouble fighting all the Lagoos nations. Right. For sure. But I think it's that would be funny, but it's also just that I think getting a king, even finding a king in person is surprisingly difficult, right? Right? I think it's OP, but like even though it's extremely overpowered, you'll find very little circumstance to actually use it a lot of the time. Right? It worked when they Sala. It didn't work when they Sala. It worked specifically with an older Kilvas king who signed it a like for help. I can show you the dialogue, right? Let me screenshot it. Like so da 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 da. I need to find it. It's somewhere in here. I think all right, like it's where is it? Yeah, Nesala, I think Nesala wasn't the person who signed the pact. It was one of his ancestors, and it's unclear how far in the past it was. How that was, right? You love that Brander basically a glitch in reality that causes the goose to bug out and lose their transformation when it happens. Yeah, I guess like Ashera didn't beta test. I think okay. Let me see where it was. So I have the dialogue. I guess this is from the Japanese translated version. I hear that there's some different things about it. but it's kind of hard to say. Let me grab the screenshot. Like Haynes talking about the Killvest Blood Pact of Pelleas. Yeah, yeah. So I think pretty much like so here's from the Japanese text translated, and it's pretty much is very much in line with what happens in the English text. So pretty much what happens is, so they like some one of the Killvest ancestors signed a blood pact to ask for help from Benyan to take back a country, right? And I think explicitly what happens in the Japanese version is that the empire gives Dayan a interest-free loan of 100 million gold. Supposedly, I think that part a little bit was left out in the English text. But then it was basically I see. Oh, yeah, it seems like in the Japanese version, the part about being signed in blood was like it was mentioned like as being ceremonial, and that part was where Pelleas was tricked. So like I think in the English version they omit this, right? And they just make it seem like, oh, like it's always signed in blood or whatever, right? But let me look at the English script. Yeah. So I think in the Japanese version they're more explicit about like it being like about being that kind of deception, right? So okay, so I think in the English version it's yeah, in the English version they just say you signed a piece of paper, but it was a blood pact. But in the Japanese version, they actually go into a bit more detail about uh like why he signed in blood and why he signed the document to begin with. He signed the document because the Benyan was giving him 100 million gold, and he signed it in blood because he was tricked into thinking that was just like tradition, right? Seems like it's just a ritual with parchment rather than a terms of service agreement that makes the blood pact make more sense. Yeah, I think it's yeah. I don't know. I don't actually know much of the difference here. I think that that's the extended script, which is actually a little better, I think. But at the same time, like I guess the same problems and other things that people complain about still hold, right? Okay, in the Serenus for in the Serenus Forest version, it says 1 billion gold. Okay, 1 billion gold. Can I link the translation table I'm referencing? Uh, I don't know. I don't know. Where did I find it? It was I found it on Reddit. Like I think it's called I can put it in the chat, but I think chat might block out links. Let me figure out. I guess I can. Yeah, does that work? Nope. I think it okay. If you guys can click it, I think it was filtered out. Oh, did you guys find it? You're not clicking that. I mean, that's where I found it. So if I get a virus, whatever. All right. So yeah, that's where the Japanese script dump is that I was using to reference some things. All right. What else? All right, we can move on to the next point and then maybe go back to it later. So yeah, I think the other thing is that like there are obvious loopholes that aren't exploited that could have bypassed problems if they just talked, right? And I guess that part is also a little frustrating because I think one of the big problems about the Blood Pact is not the Blood Pact, it's how everyone in refuses to talk about the Blood Pact until like until after it stops mattering, right? So like there's lots of loopholes, right? For instance, like if you leave the country, then you can bypass the Blood Pact. If you take orders from a higher authority like Sonic, you can bypass the Blood Pact. So like it feels like you can exploit it, but the fact that they don't exploit it makes it feel cheap. I guess it makes sense that all of these things, these loopholes, are hidden by obscurity and people being too afraid to try them, right? Because of Benyan's spies, and it's mentioned directly. That is mentioned directly. Yeah, there are spies that would tell Lacane about it. But at the same time, right, it feels like there are many moments where only the main characters are present. And it feels like a bit weird that they can't mention it at all. But I guess the other thing is, even if there were spies, right? If they mentioned this, like if they tried the Sonic trick, then they could have bypassed it entirely, right? There's no way they could have known, but like the fact that that was a possibility makes it feel cheap. I think that's basically it, right? The fact that like they could like if they told Sonic about the Blood Pact, then they could have been under her authority, and that's exactly what Asala did in this little loophole, right? But even though it wouldn't make very much sense for them to put all their eggs into one basket like that, the fact that that loophole exists and that it wasn't exploited earlier when it would have mattered, it feels like a little cheap. Micaiah's foresight is very specific in that it tells her that defying the Blood Pact is certain to spell doom, but it doesn't tell her Sonic can help them to circumvent it. That's true, yeah. Like if anything else, like why wouldn't foresight tell her like that there's a clear way out that way, but why didn't her future telling ability tell her like a better way? Like because that feels like it would have been a better way, right? Why is there a Sonic loophole if it's Lacane just writing it? Why would he leave it there? I think it's so that if Lacane dies, that loophole was left in to bind Benyan and Dayan, so that even if Lacane himself dies, the pact can still be triggered, right? And that's one thing that they mention. Like, what if Lacane isn't actually the holder of the pact? You can hand it off to someone else, and then that would possibly that would retain the threat and mean that just killing him isn't enough, right? So it binding the nations, I think that could be a specific case of that of that pact, because like the first pact was between some randomly mystic guy and Ashnard's dad, and so in that case it wouldn't be binding between nations, right? Right? It would just be bound between. Yeah. Oh wait, I think. Oh, I think. Right. I think in that case, for the so Ashnard himself invoked the terms of the pact. Now that I remember, so I think the reason Ashnard didn't die wasn't because he was like gambling. It was because he was the owner of the pact. So I guess in that one it would be kind of like a day in to day in pact. I don't know. And I think you can either kill the person who wrote the pact or the owner or master or servant of the pact. Who knows? All these details are kind of like a self blood pact. Yeah, like it's like a blood pact from day in to day in. All right. Yeah, I think okay, we can talk about the other parts, which is I think one of the big deals about the blood pact is that it makes everyone lose agency. And I think that's mainly a problem in a game, right? Where you ostensibly have control of the characters. I think everyone hates it when the characters do something really stupid, the ones that you have control over, right? Because it feels like you're being forced to make those decisions, right? If Micaiah and the Dawn Brigade were purely an NPC faction being compelled to do this, I think people would have fewer problems. But I think the fact that a player faction specifically was compelled to action by this is a problem. And like the Blood Pact does strip away agency from the Micaiah and Dawn Brigade, but like especially because most of them aren't even aware of what's going on, right? The actual Dawn Brigade, like Edward, Nolan, Leonardo, there is like, oh yeah, we're fighting for Benyan. I don't know. I just love fighting for my country, right? That's pretty much it, right? We'll follow you anywhere, Micaiah, right? That's but the fact that like it does rob a lot of characters of their agency is a problem. What do you guys think? Like Ashnard is literally insane. Why do you need to say he was in the Blood Pact? I think it's needed to so that Ashnard would have some measure of plausible deniability for how he rose to the throne. He can't just kill everyone. I mean, I guess he did kill the king. So now that I think about it, there's not there's not much like there's not much. But I guess it would have been hard to disguise him killing 21 other people of Dan royalty. You'd rather if Micaiah took a controversial stance on her own than be forced into these actions. Yeah, I think basically what people were wanting was they wanted a story where like I think we all want a story where two different protagonist factions fight for sensible reasons. But the problem with that is that you can't do that and also have both of them be likable, especially when one of them is explicitly the good guys. Right? It's not like there's not like they're fighting over like mining rights in the Crimean Dayan border, right? It's not there's no like actual other source of conflict that can be established. Reminder that Nolan's the actual leader of the Dawn Brigade. He just follows Micaiah blindly in part 3. Well, I mean, Nolan is like the leader, but not really the leader, right? Micaiah, like after a certain point, is the general of Dayan's armies, and so she does have higher authority. You felt like specifically they were using it to keep the player characters from fighting each other past the point that the players would think that they would, and then soon after the three sides just joined forces. I think as pointed out, she wasn't forced, she was pushed that way, but she didn't think over possible other solutions because she was so used to fighting. Yeah, I think the other problem is just mainly that she has this future telling ability, and there were other ways that she could have done things, but I don't know. It's a bit strange. If the only source of conflict that Varys can cook up is cursed contract and blood, then that conflict feels forced and unnatural. Why does that feel forced and unnatural, though, right? I think that's what we're trying to figure out. It would be more interesting to have Micaiah act of her own volition. I think the problem with that is that if it's the Laguz Alliance and Ike are like explicitly the good guys in every single way. So having Micaiah fight against them for a country that doesn't like that sees them as cannon fodder, it wouldn't make any sense ever. So like the only way to have this circumstance is to have that. I think the thing is that a lot of part 3 is about the mystery about why the hell Dayan is siding with Benyon, like their former oppressors, right? And we only find out at the very end that it was because of a magical contract, right? I think other forms of coercion simply would not have made any sense either, right? Like I don't know, like because any other form of coercion can be overcome with military force, right? And then siding with another force to fight against that force that's coercing you is always a logical course of action. But like the fact that like I see a lot that people say that Benyon could have forced Dayan in any other way, and I kind of disagree because there are no other ways that make sense. Am I incorrect here? Because aside from magical death pact, there's no other way to like compel a nation that far away from you to doing things against their own interest when they could just fight against you, right? It feels less unnatural and more unnecessary, especially because every chapter with the Dawnbreaker could have been Benyon fighting against them. Maybe they struggle to get along. I think if we instead of Micaiah and fighting against the Grill mercenaries and the Laguz Alliance, if we instead had like Senator Benyon forces, I think then a lot of part 3 there would be no conflict at all, right? Because a lot of part 3 story is about the Blood Pact. You're basically saying like, what if we cut out the second half of part 3 entirely and had an arc where they fight the Senate instead? But I think then the problem is that that would overlap significantly with the part 4 and endgame plots, which is basically fighting the Senate, right? I guess it's a bit different because in part 4 and the end game, you're fighting against disciples of order, but oh no, they are just Benyon forces. They're the Senate, right? you're fighting against the exact same people that you would if you were fighting them in a way where they were not empowered by a Shera, right? You're saying that's forced from a writer perspective because you usually want to create a conflict that naturally comes to personalities of characters. That's what you call it, false conflict. Yeah, I guess like the people being forced to fight without being without wanting to do so is a little is definitely kind of contrived and bad writing in some ways. But like at the same time, right? I guess it depends on like how do you do that and also make both sides sympathetic. If you want, I think they wanted that to happen from the beginning, and the moment they chose that, just like the Blood Pact, like they were doomed, right? Like from the very start, if that's what you want, like I think Fire Emblem is written in a way specifically to try to hit like reach certain objectives, right? It's not like an organically written story. It's a story written around a bunch of pivotal plot moments and everything else like written around that. And I think the Blood Pact is the device that they needed to get Micaiah and the Grill mercenaries and Ike to fight. And the moment that they decided that that was the overall plot point they wanted, then they didn't have a chance. Make them wrong in both ways. That's how they can both be sympathetic. Yeah, but then the problem is then if they do that, then they have to make Ike wrong in any way. But like that's not Ike's character, right? Ike's character is to be like the like no nonsense, like what are you stupid? Just do the good thing kind of guy, right? That's pretty much Ike's role in the story is to call everyone stupid and then do the obviously good thing. While everyone's like tied up, oh no, I'm sad about like humanity or something, and he's like, I was like, oh what? Okay, all right, skill issue. All right, I think another factor I see is that people dislike the Blood Pact for, I guess making Nisala kind of blameless for whatever he does. This is kind of a bit strange, right? Because like, for one, it creates a different kind of character for Nisala than a lot of people imagined. I think the because the Blood Pact, Nisala is portrayed as a kind of overall well-meaning, but kind of binded by the Blood Pact to do stuff that he doesn't want to do. And there's a couple of like theories that go around about like why he does the stuff he does in Path of Radiance, but I feel like people were expecting like an actual betrayal from Nisala, probably just because like that would be more varied. But I think the fact that is that I don't feel like the Blood Pact necessarily like cheapens or ruins Nisala's character, but it does make him into a different kind of character, right? I think it's a lot of the conflict I feel like about the Blood Pact is that they feel like a lot of people imagine a different story, which is that is better. And it's easy to imagine that story, obviously, but who knows how easy difficult it will be to execute it. But I think like the main point of the fact is that like it's not necessarily that the point itself is bad, is that it's very easy to imagine something that they feel is better. And I feel like that's a lot of the time what happens in like media like this, where like basically people think I could have written that better, and then they write up their own OC story, which is like completely divorced from the original's thing, right? It's like everyone trying to fix the story, right? It's like for Game of Thrones, everyone writing their own endings. I feel like personally that's not really an indictment on the original story as much as it is a fervent desire of the reader to enact their own will on the story. Maybe I'm being like, what do you guys think about that? Right? Like, do you guys think that the Blood Pact, like, it feels like a lot of the time people arguing about the Blood Pact and similar story points is very much more like a I could have done it better kind of thing, as opposed to actually criticizing the specific merits of the plot points that were happening. Because like I guess Nisala being a being misunderstood is not objectively wrong, but it's not what people wanted. Right? There's nothing wrong with Aesala being like compelled to do this, and it doesn't make his character necessarily worse. But people imagined another Naesala in their head that was cooler, and that's why they and that's why they dislike it. It feels like Naesala's betrayal is different from his character in Path of Radiance. I think the Blood Pact, I feel like it's written differently because Naesala's involvement in the Blood Pact has very little to do with his involvement in Path of Radiance. Right? He's not compelled by the Benyal Zenith to do anything in Path of Radiance. He sells he sells his friend to slavery as a prank to get money. That's what he does. And otherwise he's like completely heroic in FE9. He doesn't do anything against anyone. Like there are some rationale I see, but they're not really mentioned, right? Like there was one guy on Reddit, like from a post from years ago, who said that Naesala did all the stuff in FE9 because he couldn't tell anyone about it, and so he was establishing funds to try to find the owner of the Blood Pact. Who knows? Not mentioned in the story, so it's a nice fan-in, but there's no evidence towards it. So what can you do? The easiest way to criticize a story is often to imagine a better base scenario, and it being so easy makes it hard to justify something like a blood pact. The Blood Pact would be fine in any other FE game. It just ruins the grounded background of Pelleas. Is Pelleas really that grounded compared to other Fire Emblem games? I feel like it's roughly the same amount of grounding. Like Shadow Dragon and just I don't know. But I guess it is definitely like the Blood Pact is definitely just on a different scale for most other Fire Emblem threats. It's kind of because they're unrelated that it feels like a problem. He sells his friend as slave for money and raids a possible ship because of his own free will. So when a Blood Pact makes him do something fucked up, it feels worse. Yeah, that makes sense. Like, it does make sense that Naesala's writing in FE9 and FE10 don't really align because his actions in FE10 had nothing to do with anything from the Blood Pact. It seems right. Like I guess you're right. We do get set up. We think about Naesala as like a schemer in a kind of way, right? In FE9, but then he doesn't actually get to do any scheming really ever. And so I guess possibly that's where the dissonance comes, right? Yeah, I think the other thing is that in FE10, Naesala doesn't really do anything, right? He has like three scenes in FE10, or like two scenes in FE10. Like the first, he's like to Boris, like, oh ho ho, I trust you, right? I trust you, Naesala. We're best of buds. Why did I ever not trust you? And then he immediately betrays him and and kills his entire. Like, I guess the degree of actions that he does is actually kind of disproportionate, right? Because he kind of massacres the entire Hawk tribe off screen. Like literally, like the Ravens themselves do it. They don't like let someone else do it. They just actually do it themselves. So okay, I guess yeah. The sheer degree of atrocities that he commits here is like kind of like ridiculous. And the fact that he's not, I guess he does blame himself for it, but like the story kind of tries to absolve him of it, which is like, I guess it's troublesome. Yeah, I hear somehow that this is apparently worse than the Japanese version, but I don't know. So people keep saying that, but I don't know what's going on there. I haven't read the script in Japanese necessarily. I read some of the extended script, but at the same time, um, I have not seen any specific examples about it being better or worse in Japanese. I would need to ask any of you guys for any help or assistance on that matter, if you guys have any. Pull up Endgame Part 3. Okay, let me look up Endgame Part 3. Apparently that's where some of it is. And Tower 1. What parts of it are there? So what specifically about the dialogue is going on there? Like just I'm not I don't have time to finish reading through all of this to get it. And Tower 1. A huge problem with the Blood Pact is a lack of rules that we don't know what counts to fulfill it. Yeah, we talked a bit about that. Uh, Kai says there's one hope who hopes a glimmer of hope for us. While in Japanese say there's nothing we can do. There's only one path left for Dayan, and that is destruction. I don't see specifically what's wrong with that because I don't really see what that does. I don't really see what that does to make the Blood Pact worse or better in any way. Right? Just because Micaiah is more or less hopeful or not, right? It's kind of hard to say, right? I mean, I guess maybe that makes it worse for you specifically, but it doesn't seem like you're saying that the weird screwed thing makes a story better. Yeah, I don't know. It's like I don't see specifically. Yeah. The other change that Almeida in English version mentions that the destruction of the documents, while she doesn't in the Japanese version. Yeah, I think that's a bit of an aside, but I think functionally speaking, it's not as if like that actually matters that much because ultimately, in Radiant Dawn, you kill the Kanan and you destroy the contract regardless, right? So it doesn't actually the actual mechanisms of the Blood Pact aren't super important because you resolve it anyway. So who knows, right? It's like it seems like these are very minute details. Okay. Have we talked about the Blood Pact Hartness as a character? We just did actually. All right. And I think the one last point that I have to make, I think it's just that uh I think the one of the main factors is that the Blood Pact, like I guess for no specific reason about like I guess not for any particular reason of the pact itself, is that everyone just refuses to talk about it. And I think that part is very much one of the worst parts about it, right? Not because of so I think the fact that you for pretty much all of part 3 everyone just refuses to explain anything. And I guess it makes sense to some degree, but the fact is that using that trope to begin with, oh, I gotta fight you, but I can't explain why. That is in itself kind of like a crime. And so I think it's yeah, it's like well, yeah, it's just annoying. Like I think I think for the most part, I guess early on it kind of I see what they were going with it, right? Because but it does kind of make you question why why anyone does anything even without knowing anything, right? Because in the early parts of part 3, Micaiah just kind of does stuff even without knowing about the Blood Pact. But I guess it kind of makes sense if you think about it because Micaiah is already like, insecure about like and not wanting to usurp Pelleas' position, so she doesn't want to question him too much. But at the same time, I feel like it drags on a bit too long, and they kind of just like do terrible things just because they're told to. Like you would think that like Micaiah would have a bit more moral fiber, right? Kane said, "Tell anyone about it," and Dan said, "Doesn't start dropping like flies." That's true, but like just because they're threatened with it doesn't make it doesn't make it better, right? It doesn't make the fact that we're forced to spend like 6 to 7 chapters where everyone refuses to talk about anything or explain any of their motives. The mystery is left up in the air a bit too long, right? Contracts in general should be a cultural taboo in Pelleas if blood pacts exist. I think the blood pacts are a relatively recent invention, and also they are kept like a state secret. And it's not like signing in blood is normal. I think that part was like that part. I guess in the Japanese text was explicitly added on by Izuka, so it shouldn't be a factor in most normal situations. But the question is like, who the hell made it? Like, I guess there's theory that Sephiroth made it, but he doesn't. I think, but considering all the other things he brags about, you think he will brag about that too, right? Like he when he talks like Jill, he's like, "Oh, I was the one who orchestrated the death of your father," right? You would think that if he were like he's very much into like admitting all of his crimes. So if he did invent the blood pact, as some people theorize he may have, you think he would have mentioned it, right? It's even weird that they're recent, or they even learned about it. Now maybe they invented it, right? But I guess then the problem is like there's just nothing comparable, right? I guess we are retreading on other points we've already talked about. All right. So yeah, I think all right. I guess I've talked about a bunch. I think we've gone through all of the points as far as I can tell. Is there anything else you think I've missed, or anything else specifically you want to dive into? Sephiroth making it makes it so much sense because he was alive for 1,000 years. Hmm. It could have made it more around Pelleas' character and how he's a poor king or easily manipulated. I don't know. I'm not sure like how much more they could have done that, right? Because I guess the thing is that the thing about the blood pact is it's one irreversible mistake that is brought about by naivete. But again, most other problems can kind of be reversed just by not continuing to do the bad thing. But this one explicitly is one that cannot. Overall thoughts? Is going to turn into a full video? I guess I could. That might have been the plan. But I think I could make this into a video. We'll see. I could cut it down and trim down my points. Why blood specifically? I mean, I think blood has significance in contracts, right? It's like a vital fluid. Blood is culturally important historically. Yeah. Every time writers chose convenience over interesting and well thought out conflict because they wanted Ike and Makai to fight. I mean, I think that's pretty much what everyone has concluded, and that's the general takeaway for what the Blood Pact is. A it's a story device, and all the justification in the world doesn't make the fact that it's a story device better, right? The fact that it is they had this original objective they wanted the two protagonist factions to fight and also be blameless, and for us to like both of them and for us to sympathize with their plight. And I think there's basically no way to do something like that without some kind of magical plot device. And the existence of that plot device itself is in itself a problem. But if they wanted to tell the story they wanted to tell, they might not have had other options. They already did enough to show he was vulnerable to manipulation. Yeah, I guess Pelleas, like we know that Pelleas is Izuka's puppet the moment that you see him, right? He defers everything to Izuka when he's in the camps. When you're when you're arguing with Izuka about the Day and Liberation Army. Is bending over backwards to achieve a Loot Corp story? Maybe the Domri was more interesting, then there might have been more people who liked Micaiah's side better. Yeah, I guess the other problem is that we know Micaiah's side is doing something bad, but then like Ike's side is always doing are objectively the good people here, right? And I guess the only bad side are the Benyan senators, who are, and I guess also I guess there's also Sephiran behind the scenes tricking everyone, right? Does Zuka show up at all in part 3? Yeah, the funny thing about Zuka is that after the end of part 1, he is immediately kidnapped by Bastion, and they just like, and that's why he disappears, and he reappears at the end of part 4 because he escapes. So the only reason Zuka disappeared was because Bastion kidnapped him to try to find a cure for Renning, pretty much, and the other Pharaoh ones. So that's actually kind of funny, and that's why he disappears. He disappears because Bastion just like snuck up behind him and like and kidnapped him, which is it's really funny. But it is kind of a, yeah, you're kind of wondering why he's gone, right? It's actually so funny what happened to Azuka. You disagree that they didn't have better options for the simple reason that Camus type characters are often pretty popular. Yeah, but the thing is with Camus type characters that you don't play as the Camus type characters for 11 chapters. And the thing about Camus type characters is that they often have no agency, right? And having no, like, reducing or having no agency for a player character is problematic, right? It's troublesome for the story. Everyone hates it. People don't like you when you do it. You always Azuka dipped and got kidnapped later. But I think Azuka, no, I think Azuka got kidnapped immediately because Azuka was there specifically so he could benefit from Pelleas and use him as a puppet. So why would he leave, right? He wasn't being like paid by Benyan. He was, I guess he was, but he was hoping to benefit from being like the king's top guy. But the fact that he wasn't there was probably almost definitely because he was immediately kidnapped. It's true. You think that there's a fundamental issue, I guess. All right. Yeah, I think let's go back to a better slide to talk about these things on. Doesn't have a character have to be unrecruitable to be a proper Camus? Yes. What if the Pelleas Saga was 3 games instead of 2? 1 game with Ike, 1 game with Kaya, and last game with what Radiant Dawn was intended to be. I don't know. I feel like Micaiah's story in itself is not, and there's not enough of it, honestly, to be its own game. Because, for one, I guess, right? I guess the other problem is that the only way Radiant Dawn works is if there's a continuity of characters throughout the parts. And that doesn't really work. You have to go between games because then, for one, the games are spaced multiple years apart. And yeah. I think even then, already as it is, Radiant Dawn's story is already quite bloated. There's a lot of stuff like in that. There's a lot of chapters I feel like that could have been cut. Granted, like they all like do stuff, and there's a lot of stuff that matters, right? To establish certain plot threads, right? A lot of chapters are spent like showing Azuka's untrustworthiness, Pelleas' ineffectiveness, Micaiah's motivations, right? And if you, I guess, the thing is like there's a lot of story things that cannot be cut, but there's a lot of game chapters I feel like can be easily cut. I feel like the problem with Radiant Dawn is that part 1 is like Lin mode, but then you always have to play Lin mode. Then it leads directly into chapters where you only use Lin mode characters against end game enemies. I don't know. There's other problems but we're not really talking about gameplay today. We're talking about the Blood Pact. I don't think. Yeah, I think it's just that overall, like part 3. I don't know. I feel like people are interested in I think the part 3 story is interesting, but then again, the part 3 story is nearly all of it is Blood Pact, right? And the entire first arc is about fighting Zelgius, right? The first 5-6 chapters are Ike versus Zelgius, and the rest of it is Blood Pact. And I don't know. If everyone hates the Blood Pact so much, why do they think it ruins the story when like part 3 is like most of the story? I'm not sure. I don't. I might be. Conflating multiple different people in this kind of argument here. The thing that annoys me is about the Blood Pact is that in part 4, it just turns. It just everyone just turns into stone. Yeah, I think that that is true, right? Because like that is another part that it's like the part I guess right after the Blood Pact starts really mattering, right? It just never happens off. Like you're being like edged on the Blood Pact triggering, so to speak, right? Where was it? Yeah, the fact that the Blood Pact stops mattering in part 4, I guess it's like a motivation to do it, but I think it's not nearly as big of a deal as it's never as big of a deal as we imagine it would be, right? Because the Blood Pact, it's all anyone's ever thinking about in the part 3. Like the medallion subplot or the main plot is like only thought of briefly until it actually that's what takes over the story, right? And so I guess the problem is that like it just feels like there's this whole big thing that we're trying to solve, but then we kind of solve it off in a side quest, like on accident, just on the way, right? I think the Blood Pact storyline is resolved at the end of Endgame at the Rebirth one. Once you the immediately after you enter the tower, you go and rip up the Blood Pact and you kill the Kane, and that's it, right? I feel like the fact that it's resolved in such an unsatisfying way, like at a time where everything is on pause and where there's no actual stakes, it feels a bit bad, right? It feels a bit weird, right? Because it feels like this is sort of something that should have mattered a bit more and been a bit more difficult to deal with than to have it just go away with no consequences, right? I think possibly a way they could have I think a cool way they could have done it that would have been like a really cool map is you corner Lacane and then he actually activates the Blood Pact and then people start dying and then you get like a death counter on the side of the screen and if you it's like a time limited map and if you take too long all of the data is destroyed and you lose the map. That would have been a more like fitting end to the Blood Pact storyline where it actually triggers and actually happens. Like the fact that it never actually goes off is a problem with the Blood Pact because we never like it doesn't feel real, right? Like instead of like maybe like perhaps instead of that final chapter or in addition to that final chapter where everyone's dying, right? Like you actually make it into Benyon and you fight Lacane, right? He triggers the Blood Pact, people start dying, and that would have been a better ending to the Blood Pact storyline because then you actually see its effects. But I think never actually seeing its effects makes it feel not real. Right? Yeah, if there's actually any consequences of it happening like on screen, then it feels less like a plot device, right? If it actually makes its own impact as opposed to just being you have to, a thing saying you do what I tell you to do, right? Then everyone just goes with it. Having no gameplay implementation hurts it. Yes, absolutely. I think that's another weakness of it. It's like a plot point without any gameplay factors, right? A lot of Radiant Dawn heavily ties its gameplay into its story, right? Like in for Lincia's Gambit, right? You have this time that you're waiting for the cavalry to arrive. In that poison swamp map, you're literally rescuing people from a poison swamp. What else is there? Right, all these defense maps against where you have to fight, where you're where the ready where the Dawn Brigade is literally fighting against the Girl mercenaries. You actually do fight the exact units you have from previous units. I think the fact that there is no gameplay implementation is a big weakness. If you chose to obey the Blood Pact and you randomly had units start dying, it would be kind of cool. That would be really cool, wouldn't it? Right? But at the same time, I think it's that would also be that would run counter to that would run the counter to like actually having an enjoyable gameplay experience. Regrettably, things that sound cool narratively are almost like definitely miserable from a gameplay perspective, because like when you involve a story, right, you lose the agency that you would have when you're playing the game, right? Because when you're playing a Fire Emblem game, you have complete control over the life and death of your characters. But like if you have like a story, if you have a story thing that kills people off, then everyone hates it. It's not what you were signing up for in a game like this. You go with the expectation that you train a character, you get to use them. They won't get taken away for some stupid reason, right? And so there's conflicting objectives there. Yellow units spontaneously exploding. That would be really cool, right? That really would be. But I think, yeah, the fact that Blood Pact never goes off is is really a big deal, huh? Because we never see its effects on screen. And I guess the way that it's portrayed, it works so slowly that it feel like it I guess it works so slowly that it feels like you could kind of outpace it, right? I don't know. Like, I don't know how long the battles took so far in Radiant Dawn. It's kind of hard to say the timeline, but I feel like the amount of people that would die before you could take out Lacane, like it could be a reason. Like the numbers that are portrayed, it feels like it could be a reasonable gamble, right? But no one ever considers it, right? Because maybe like I think in the case of the Kilvis King, right, the number of people dying is an arithmetic progression, right? One death, two deaths, three deaths, four, five, six. On day 100 people would die, right? Theoretically, so maybe 5,000 people die. I don't know how big Dan is, so it's kind of hard to say. But I'm just trying to think. Like, do you think like I think they could have gambled that they could have taken like if they allied with Sonicy and the Grill mercenaries, do you think they probably could have taken out Lacane in like a couple months, right? Like the numbers make it feel reasonable to actually just go fuck it, invoke the pact. Let's see if it will kill enough people before we kill you, right? But I think the numbers just make it feel like in the story they make it feel like they don't have a chance of doing it, but in the story it feels like they really do, right? They took bigger losses for the war. I think it's different between the soldiers dying and like random people dying. And the other thing is that like Dan was like blood pacted before, and it didn't destroy the country entirely. So like, I feel like I don't know. I think a lot of this can be written off with like I guess Lacane. He does have a rewarp staff, so he can run away however literally anywhere. So it would, but they don't know that. I guess Pelleas knows that, but it's kind of like it feels like maybe they didn't really have a shot, but in the story, it feels like they should have more of a shot than they think. Right? They think they have no chance of ever like of of surviving if they oppose Benyan, but they really kind of do from other information that we have. Right? Like there's multiple routes that are possible, but Micaiah's future telling ability says that they don't work, so I guess they don't. But it feels like they still could, and that's the problem. That's a problem. And I guess maybe like it could have been better if they made it more abrupt, more obviously, right? But it just feels like the death rate is like too slow to really make it that big of a deal. I don't know. What if the blood pack was a bluff? We've talked about that. I mean, it could have been, and like it feels like it basically might as well have been because it never goes off. But with Micaiah, like Micaiah uses her foresight to know that it does in fact work. Just make the pact more OP. Yeah, if the pact was like more obviously overpowered, then I feel like it will be I don't know. It'll be better and worse, but at the same time, like it'll be better in that it'll be more obvious that they can't oppose it. It'll be worse in that it would feel more overpowered and more contrived. You have to assume that the Blood Pact doesn't do anything after people got turned to stone. Yes, that's pretty much what happens. And that's like a plot point where they figure, yeah, we don't have to obey Benyan anymore because everyone is a rock, right? I guess then the problem is that all the other Dayan soldiers, right, who are not petrified, they should technically still be valid targets, but they aren't targeted. I guess maybe this got lucky. Dayan has like 10,000 soldiers, so they have maybe 80,000 people in their nation. Yeah, it's like I feel like they could probably rough out. They could probably take the hit for a while, right? I don't know. Like after 3 months, it's like 5,000 deaths. After 6 months, it's like 180. Like so 180 times 180 plus 181 divided by 2. 16,000. Okay, then like if you get to 6 months, then you're probably at it's a pretty big problem. You just had a dumb idea. What the Blood Pact went off anyway, and Micaiah just believed that it'll be okay, is all she needed. Yeah. 80,000 is way too few for people for a real nation. Yeah, that's true. Like 80,000 people was like a suburb. Granted, it's not too unreasonable, but like that's more like a duchy. I think it's like how do I put this? Radiant Dawn does not do very well in scaling, or rather having accurate numbers, right? I think Kilvis is only like 10,000 people, which like half the people die. Who knows how far in the past that is though, right? Benyan is mentioned to have a few million people, which I guess that makes sense for a country. But then like all these numbers are kind of like all over the place. Like the Crimean Royal Knights, there's like 6,000 of them. There's like 10,000 Dayan troops, and the coalition army is roughly like around 10,000 at the end of part 3 after significant losses. So all these numbers, they're just kind of thrown around. I don't feel like the intelligence system sat down and worked out how big every country should be. Yeah, Fire Emblem populations stats are absurd. Yeah, they don't make any sense. I won't put too much stock in them because I think they're just put out without much thought being put into it. I think they could have tossed in line that the issue isn't that it kills every day. It kills more in a day where people have already lost a lot of people to war. I think it's also that Micaiah is like really squeamish about civilian deaths or just like death happening in front of her. That's the other reason. That's the other big reason, right? She really doesn't like it when civilians die, and she's willing to do drastic measures to save people immediately in front of her, even though that might cause future harm. That's like the whole plot point in part 1 with when she uses sacrifice to rescue a kid, but then more people die as a result, like in the long run, right? But that's possibly there, but I don't really feel like that's a theme that you kind of pick up on, but it's not really one that they explore. You generally wonder if they needed a conflict for Ike, and that's why they had Dayan get forced to fight. Possibly, yeah. Ike has like no motivations. I hate to say, right? Ike is like a very flat character who just kind of like, again, his role in the story is to be like the common sense guy and to tell everyone that they're dumb for having their stupid opinions. That's literally all he does. In all of Radiant Dawn and Path of Radiance, he's like the guy with the modern morals. I think I don't know. I have like I get a little annoyed by Ike sometimes because he reminds me too much of like isekai protagonists where he has like no stake in anything and then just shows up and just like moralizes over everyone. But maybe that's just me, right? Ike just feels like he has no stakes with in anything, and he's like, I'm gonna go do the good thing because I am the good guy, right? Solo leveling Ike. Basically, yes. And I think that probably wasn't as. I think that's a lot of people like him because he is the no nonsense modern morals guy. But then like the modern morals guy in a medieval setting where he has the power to enforce his modern morals, right? And I guess like back when this game was released, that wasn't nearly as popular as a trope. But like it's been overdone so much that I personally become a little sick of it, and so by association, I kind of dislike it a little. Do you think that this is something that other protagonists would have done? The only character you can remember who submits like this, knowing they're on the wrong side of history, is Camus. I mean, that's basically what a Camus is, right? They fight on the wrong side despite being kind of a good person. But then the issue is that you don't have a Camus as a playable character, so you don't have to like deal with having agency taken away because he never had agency to begin with. Right? If you had to play as Camus for like 15 chapters, you might get mad that he's forced to fight on the other side. But since he's not, well, you don't have to deal with that, and then you just get to you just get to kill him for his gratis, and then he shows up on another continent with a mask or something. I don't know. Camus got retcon is fighting for Ubelo's life. How can they retcon the Blood Pact? Oh yeah, I guess like there was more writing there too, but I mean I don't know. Shadow Dragon and New Mystery are rather light on the writing aspect, and I don't know. People, I think the main thing is just that Camus are not playable characters, and so people don't get mad when their agency is taken away, because I mean, a lot of Fire Emblem characters don't have agency, and that's not like a problem that a lot of people bring up because they're not player characters. It's just explicitly a problem that the player character gets their agency taken away. That is a problem. Like previously, we were able to control these characters, but then like later we had to control them in a state where they were under duress, and then that part feels bad. All right. If you're Camus as a player or character, the other army actually wants to recruit him. I mean, that's basically Radiant Dawn, right? You are playing Micaiah is the Camus to some degree, but then the problem is that you had to play as her when she's not the Camus. It's like the frustration of the courier and FNV Fallout New Vegas being blamed for the Divide incident, even though we don't have control of them at the time. Railroading, basically. Yeah, that's basically it, right? Like, it's not our fault that we have to do this, but then we play as a character and they get blamed for it. Then that part is frustrating for some people. Imagine FB10 Ike feeling like an isekai protagonist is earned after his legend status after FB9. Possibly, yeah, but I mean, it's a matter of taste, I guess. Personally, you think the biggest problem with the Death Pact is how Pelleas not reading the terms and conditions of something he just signed is frustrating? I think I don't know. I feel like there could have been any number of tricks that, right? It's not as if Pelleas reading the contract would have let him not get his blood pacted, right? The fact, I think, like it's not just like a Disney Plus situation there. I think we talked a bit about this. I feel like that part isn't really that big of a deal, mainly because like he was set up from the beginning, right? He was found by like his primary supporter from the very beginning betrayed him, right? And he specifically, it's not like Pelleas being an idiot or a fool is a bad thing or out of character, because he is explicitly characterized as being a fool and a bad king and useless and not fit for his position, right? The Blood Pact was literally not part of the contract. Yeah, no idea the Blood Pact existed. Yeah, like basically it could have. I think it was the exact document, but it could have like there could have been any number of things. It could have been like the document under the document, like the bleed through the blood is enough, possibly. It could have the text could also have nothing to do with the Blood Pact, right? Maybe it's in some ancient language that you can't read, and so some form of Banyan language, right? It doesn't. It's not a matter of like Pelleas signing something he didn't read. It's a matter of, I think there's enough. I guess it's not explicitly said but I feel like there's enough justification to think that he never had a chance to begin with. Regardless, honestly, you could probably make the pack more developed by introducing it in part 1, have the characters nervous about the contract being in effect. Don't tell the players yet what it does. I don't know. I feel like a lot of part 3 hinges on the pact being a mystery. So it's there's conflicting objectives there, right? Again, like chapters 3.3-6 through 3-11, a lot of it is about the mystery about why is Pelleas doing this? Why are you fighting for Benyan? Let's stop this. Why can't we stop this, right? And like first I guess they think just that Pelleas is like has like they just trust Pelleas too much, which Pelleas is like a good guy. He's a fool, but he's a good guy. So they would have no reason to like really doubt his motivations, like even if he's doing something that seems to be really bad, right? But I guess like it does feel a bit bad, like the fact that they just can't talk about it and they leave it a mystery for a bit too long. You feel like Izuka being such an obvious villain was a bigger crime. Blood Pact, yeah, I guess that's true, right? Because the fact that Izuka is so obviously shady and Pelleas is blind to it is another matter that makes it feel like, I mean, come on. Like your main advisor is a guy that looks like that, and you trust what he says. I guess that part is like, come on, that's a little stupid, isn't it? But like, I guess if you think about the circumstances, I feel like it could be explained away. But like it's like like you trust a guy that looks like this, right? Like that's like I guess the one of the big problems of Bazooka is like, or rather just this is just a Fire Emblem thing in general, where villains just like who aren't immediately revealed to be villains look so evil that that it feels strange for anyone to ever trust them. Like Jeddah in FE10. Like that guy is purple, man. That guy is purple. Why do you trust him? Like imagine a guy that looks like this and trusting him. Or a guy that looks like this. He's even got the monocle and everything. Like what the hell? This is like the most evil looking motherfucker in the world, and you trust this guy, right? Right? Like look at this guy. Look at the top of his head. Yeah, it's like, yeah, I think that's the other thing, right? I guess that makes it feel like, yeah, I think another common thing was that back in the day, around the time where people were fomenting a lot of criticism, people were very critical of stories of some plots happening because some people were idiots. I think they call it holding the idiot ball, and people were obsessed with the idea of having every character act like perfectly optimally and rationally. And I think that might be a factor into playing why the Blood Pact is also kind of unpopular, because a lot of people had that mentality. I believe there's like a whole like subgroup of like writing people, like rationalists, and I guess that subculture has its own annoying problems that I won't dive into, but I feel like that might be a factor into why something like this is so reviled, right? Is less holding an idiot ball and more trusting in a villain who looks so obviously evil. Yeah, but I don't feel like you gotta sign point these things, man. You gotta make the villains look evil. Otherwise, people will start thinking they're hot and arguing for them. See Fire Emblem Three Houses? No, okay. I mean, for instance, Krania has a huge fandom, despite doing nothing besides being a hot mo clown, right? Is this gonna be a video? You missed a lot of the streams so far. You want to know if you have to watch from the start. We go through a lot of points. I think I might make it into a video, but I think we talked about a lot of things that I don't know. I'm not sure if I make it into a video. I'll probably re-narrate things. I'll just compile all the points we talked about into a more concise format. But then you're missing out on the discussion, I guess. It looks much older in FE10. Well, yeah, I don't know. I think it's just that in FE9 it looks like this. He looks like this. He looks like the evil mad scientist in as portrayed in like a comic book where he argues against the professor about like ethics or something. Like that's what he looks like. I guess he looks more like an actual like guy in Radiant Dawn. He even has like a book, like he's going to class. Izuku just stays in his little tower doing awful experiments. Was not surprising. He looks bad. I don't know. I think it's look at the monocle, man. Look at the monocle. I feel like a lot of characters that wear monocles, they're like almost overwhelmingly evil, right? Also, they have sending zones. Can't they use those to communicate secretly to the other side without the Senate finding out? Not really. I think the only sending zones they have are with the herons. That's their main point of communication. They don't long distance communication is not really a thing in Radiant Dawn at all. They don't have like sending. This isn't D&D. Looking to be evil, you always found to be a weak argument. I agree. I mean, I get it, but at the same time, it's not like there's other factors at play, right? You can't always judge everyone based on their appearance. And the simple fact is that like Pelleas has this position because of Izuka, and so he owes everything to him, and so he of course he would trust him, right? Granted, he does a lot of just bad stuff, but I think if you aren't aware of his backstory, and then it's easy to take him at his word. His design being so obvious makes it harder to see things from Pelleas' perspective. Yeah, I guess the other fact is that it's not just his appearance; it's just also his actions, right? So it's kind of hard to trust Zuka ever after he recommends poisoning the water supply, transforming Morim into a feral one. What other bad horrible crimes does he want you to do? Like there's a lot. Like a lot of part one is just you like fighting against like Micaiah objecting to Azuka wanting to do war crimes, right? So it feels like it's really hard to trust him after that. But I guess you could kind of write it off as being like he's just really committed to the war effort. And I guess like they are the Dayan Liberation Army is in a rather desperate situation a lot of the time. So like you can kind of excuse it, but I mean also like come on, right? Like you're like every single recommendation this guy has is a war crime. Players can't trust him because they knew he was a bad guy from the first game. That is true, yeah. That is also true. Pelleas trusting Izuka is naive at best. Izuka's obviously getting benefits from the deal, so it's not like Pelleas saw Izuka making sacrifices just for his case. I don't know. I think Pelleas trusting Izuka is just like it's basically he was nothing before Izuka found him, basically. And so I think he feels like he owes loyalty to him and trusts him because of that, right? He's not even the real Dayan Prince. That's the thing, right? So in truth, he actually does owe everything to Izuka. One problem is that Zuka's pragmatic arguments are delivered cartoonishly poorly as well. That is true. Yeah, he doesn't make a very good case for himself ever. He doesn't even make a case like I'm doing this for the greater good. He's always he's like geeking out about trying to about his experiments. That is true. So yeah, I guess his even his dialogue doesn't portray him very well. So it makes it hard to like it makes it harder to believe that Pelleas would trust Izuka, right? Like I guess everyone has a limit, but I feel like people should have thought that Pelleas would have stopped trusting Izuka after he did like a many bad, like the second bad thing, right? Or maybe like it was like a 3 strikes or out kind of thing, and Izuka just didn't do a third obviously abhorrent thing. And so yeah, I don't know. The other possible matter is that maybe Izuka sold out Pelleas to do the Blood Pact specifically because Pelleas was kind of questioning him. right? That's the other thing, right? But I think I'm not. We don't actually know exactly when Azuka's allegiances flipped, or if they were like that from the beginning. Can we also call Almeida the idiot bottle holder for trusting Azuka? I think Almeida's circumstances are more understandable, right? They explicitly say this, like she is maddened with grief, and she shows she is very easy to deceive. I think throughout the entire game, we can easily see that she is obviously very delusional about a lot of things, and so you can kind of question her mental fortitude. So I don't know. I feel like just merely a character being a fool is not a reason to condemn an action. But I think it's just a lot of I feel like a lot of the characters act correctly mostly in the situations they're placed in. Just that the situations they're placed in are is orchestrated from means outside the control. Almeida is generally just a bad person and doesn't give a crap about Dayan. I think Almeida is just driven by grief mostly and loneliness because I think she doesn't like she's been not in contact with any of her family for like 15 years. That's the whole thing why Kurth Naga shows up. The Blood Pact isn't actually that deadly. After 100 days, only 5,000 people were dead. Yeah, but I guess I guess then the problem is if they never find it, then Dane is doomed to a slow destruction, right? After 6 months, that's like 17,000 people. After a year, that's 365 times 365 divided by 2, 6. After a year, that's 66,000 people. So I think it really starts escalating really quickly. And that's like I guess then maybe your country is dead in like 2 or 3 years minimum. So I think it's like there is a case to be made that they could have outpaced it if they just like decided to thunder run to Benyan and kill the Kane. But I think they just thought it was too risky to gamble on it, especially since it'll be hard to find the individual senator, and it's possible they could pass off as someone else. And also, Lacane literally has a rewarp staff that can teleport him across countries, so he could probably run very easily. You're telling me they couldn't get the Hawks to search the entire kingdom in 6 months if it avoided a massive deadly war? I think they probably could not have. Yeah, I think it will not be reasonable to assume they could have done that easily. It's like this. It's not even like a Lord of the Rings thing where like why didn't the eagles fly over Mount Doom, right? Because they were afraid or something. But it's not like you don't need additional justification to figure out that assassinating like the highest positioned person in the country is really hard. We had to consider that Micaiah doesn't want anyone to die whatsoever, so she's not willing to risk it. Yeah, I think Micaiah partially just fights because she thinks she can take on the Benyan forces, and she thinks that she can like win to some degree, and she does do a lot towards it, right? Basically, pretty much in the story, they say that like they've taken extremely heavy losses from like the when they're attacked in the valley. Mordor had anti-air defenses. No. Oh man. Me when the Eagles carrying Frodo and Sam get shot down by the Mordorian S-400, the Mordorian Patriot battery station at the base of Mount Doom. I guess that's why they should not try to cheat the story, huh? Nah, I'd win. It's probably significantly easier to assassinate the most important character of the country in the Fire Emblem universe. I think it's also just a matter of it's too far away, and we just have no idea of the time scale it takes for these battles to happen. I guess like in the moment, like maybe we think it happens over. I guess Gallia managed like to retreat in a couple of days, so like, we can imagine each chapter to be a couple of days. But I feel like the issue is that what could happen is they could just hide the Blood Pact like under a rock in a mountain, and no one would ever find it. And then you're just fucked, right? I guess that's what they were really worried about. The ring will corrupt the eagles. That who cares? You think part 3 taking out Makai's foresight was a waste? Give me Sora trying to outwit a precog. I think the other thing is that Makai was fighting with fewer troops in every single case for the most part. And so like, even though like she was outmatching the coalition forces, it seems at most turns, she was not able to actually inflict a decisive defeat, even though she was doing that, right? The whole game takes place over around 6 months. I have no idea. It's kind of hard to say, right? But like, I'm just trying to think because the only time that a time scale on the order of days is really mentioned is when the Galleon forces are given 3 days of retreat from Zelgius after Zelgius 1v1 Skrimir. But I can't think of any other time when times like days or weeks are mentioned. Summer 648 to winter 486. So is it actually 6 months? I don't actually know. I don't know about any of the dates. I don't remember there being dates really mentioned in the story aside from some durations. If Makai was xenophobic, it would make the story better. I don't know. I think that would harm her character and make her more obviously like villainous. Because I mean, a whole thing about Radiant Dawn is that racism is bad. So making one of the main characters like that would not really be very good towards making them a protagonist. That will be very more obvious character assassination. And these few chapters happen in the span of a night. That is true, yeah. But I guess then is a question of how much time is there between chapters, right? We should argue why Izuka isn't racist. Well, actually, if you look in the dialogue, Izuka says when Tabaran attacks Izuka, Izuka says, "Please know that my experiments were not about the Lagoon specifically," or something. I think those are his literal lines. But whatever. All right. She allows racism in her army in 3-6. Yeah, all the Dan soldiers are a bit enthusiastic about getting are a bit enthusiastic. Yeah, that's true. How many people knew the Blood Pact existed before during the story, before the Blood Pact was revealed? So the thing is like maybe like 3 people knew about them. Maybe the upper echelon of the Banyan Senate, Izuka, Ashnard, Almeida. Only like basically no one knew about it except for the extreme higher ups. And I think maybe it's mentioned a little about like in Legends, but like there are ones that people don't really believe. Is it ever mentioned how when Isela got stuck in the Blood Pact? Yeah, one of his ancestors signed a Blood Pact with Benyan, and he inherited it. That's so then he was stuck with it even. Yeah, that's pretty much it. All right. So I think we've talked pretty much about everything. I think we're starting to retread a bunch of ground. So I think that's probably. I guess we can go to some conclusions. I guess. I think let me type up some conclusions. So I guess the main issues that people have are let's sum everything up. Let me export a slide so I can just type on it on the screen. Pelleas inheriting the Blood Pact from Mad King Ashnard due to his new rule could have been much better writing. I feel like that that would be interesting, but it'll be. I feel like yeah, it wouldn't. There's still the lack of agency problem, right? That's the main problem that we're all talking about, or one of them. So yeah, let me type something up. So main takeaways. or conclusions, I guess. Feel free to pipe up with any particular the ones you want to talk about or any ones you want mentioned. So I guess like lack of agency is one of the biggest deals. There's a lack of agency. The mechanics of the blood pacts are unclear. Like it's overpowered for the setting. What else are we thinking? I think Pelleas being tricked is like not really that big of a deal, right? It's just mainly like there's lack of agency for player characters specifically. The mechanics are unclear. It's overpowered for the setting. Like there's clear loopholes not exploited. That could have been. Generally being a cop out. I guess it's not really a cop out, but it's like a poor motivation or conflict in general. Like just categorically. Like there's no ideological conflict at stake. There's no actual conflict at stake, and no one has any real reason to fight. Granted, I think like a lot of Path of Radiance, Radiant Dawn is like, let's stop this pointless war, right? But it's mostly because like previously it was because one guy actually wanted the war. Here, no one wants the war, and then they still do the same thing, and it feels a bit weird that way. And yeah, the anticlimactic resolution. That's I think one of the main things. Like it just fizzles out. Like it stops mattering. Like stops mattering. Then it just resolves like out of nowhere. Like for such a what a big deal it was. I think the main thing that really turns me off of it is that it just goes away so easily without any consequence. Right? It's all postponed by literal acts of God, and then they just kill the guy. Like it feels like for how powerful it was, it feels like it should have been more difficult and more painful to resolve. Whereas this resolved basically bloodlessly. I guess not really bloodlessly because like thousands of people died from eating rock, right? Micaiah rode down those boulders and killed thousands of people, seemingly. But at the same time, it feels like this it never goes off, right? It never happens. It never actually activates. Like, it doesn't feel like a real threat. So it just feels like they're just being blackmailed over nothing, over and over and over, because it never actually goes off. We never see it on screen. So not seeing the blood pact on screen, I think, is a major factor why it's not super interesting, or it's not as cool or interesting, or as and why people don't like it mainly, right? It should have been the main conflict of the game. In the way it's a small roadblock. Yeah, it's like it just like suddenly takes over the story. Then it disappears just as fast. It's basically only a factor for like 9 chapters. But like it suddenly shows up, like it wrecks it makes everyone's problem, but then it just stops mattering immediately. Seeing a future vision of the blood pact on screen would have been good enough. Yeah, I think that would have helped, right? Just like seeing, instead of just being tech, seeing a CG of like dead people in Dayan would have made resonate with people more. I think. Wondering if Pelleas dying actually stopped the blood pact, would that be a more satisfying conclusion? I think that could be a cool way to do it. If like him dying actually stops it, then I guess then the problem is then you don't get to play chapter 3-13 or the final chapter, right? I guess the thing is that if The problem is that in order to go into part 4, you need to have everyone still fighting, and that's like. So if the Blood Pact is ever actually resolved, then everyone stops fighting, and then Ashera doesn't wake up, or rather, like the tension doesn't build with the whole heartbeat thing and the numbers ticking down. And so I think that would actually not necessarily make the story better. Yeah. All right. So yeah, I think so. Yeah. Our conclusions are that, according to our poll, we have 65% yes, it's bad. 35% it's not bad. I think that's a pretty stable number. Around 1,000 people have voted for this. Side note, number ticking down and heartbeat getting louder is one of the coolest things in the game. Yeah, I think it is a very cool moment, even if the map sucks. Yune was trying to stop her from waking up through the war, though. So what's the point of just not waking her up naturally? I mean, I think strictly speaking, what happens in the story is that technically the war wasn't at war, but what they did was they woke her up with the Gouter, but as if like it weren't the case that literally 99.95% of the world was at war. So I feel like they're splitting hairs at that point. I think it's that people are frustrated when there's no ideological conflict to explain a conflict between protags. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I think part of the problem is that the shared problem doesn't need to be married to the Blood Pact. If the Blood Pact wasn't the reason, what would you have enjoyed? I think I don't know. The Blood Pact, all of it was. It seems this everything seems to have been orchestrated by Sephiran mainly, and I think it's not really explicitly mentioned, but I think Sephiran was the architect behind the Blood Pact, and as a result, the Blood Pact is married to Ashera's story because that's how Sephiran brings about the end of the world by forcing everyone to fight through. Like, if he can't get everyone to fight naturally in a way that will wake up Ashera, he would do it in a way that would force everyone to do it, right? Because he wants to die mainly. If they was gonna summon her through Galdor anyway, they could have done it as the Blood Pact thing was being solved rather than much later. I don't know. Hatari not being at war doesn't matter because Hatari isn't in Pelleas. So true. That is true. Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I think Ashera wasn't even awake. Ashera wasn't awake, but Ashera like isn't even aware that of like a lot of things. I guess the thing is that Radiant Dawn is very much about like the god Ashera being an imperfect god, and a lot of it is that. So I think some measure of the fact that they are ignorant of a lot of things does uh is telling. It helps the story. The Queen of Hatari was involved in the war. That's true. Yeah, that was true. Sephiroth manipulated Ashera. I think. I mean, yeah, I guess to some degree, but I think Ashera we just wanted to blow everything up anyway, and Sephiroth just wanted also to do that. It's also kind of really funny how like I guess how we haven't gotten to it in the summaries yet, but it's kind of funny how at the end of Radiant Dawn, Ashera is literally like summoning soulless bodies to fight you as like cannon fodder. That's like a whole plot point. It's kind of funny how like how desperate she gets and how like willing to like debase her supposed perfect order self that she's like summoning she's summoning Oliver is one of her disciples of order. Like that's like I mean, come on, like there's this little bit of dialogue from Sephiroth that's like really amazing that I think we probably won't see in the playthrough, but there's a truly amazing bit of dialogue, boss dialogue. Let me grab it. Yeah, let me put it on the screen, or let me read it out loud. Where is it? Sephiran, Oliver, lost conversation. Sephiran, Oliver. Okay. Oliver, Sephiran. Okay. I confess that your presence has me bewildered. Could this be part of Yune's plan? I simply never would have imagined you here. Your presence proves that Pelleas is unraveling at the seams. Judgment cannot come soon enough. That's like, I feel like that's like one of the best lines of boss dialogue in Radiant Dawn. Judgment cannot come soon enough. It's yeah, just so good. Where is it? Where is it? I'm trying to find the exact piece of dialogue. I cannot find it. Like a video. Here's one. I feel like this could be a reaction image. There's the other one. Judgment cannot come soon enough. All right. That's about it. I think I've talked enough, yapped enough. 2.5 hours of Blood Pact. I think we've talked about pretty much most possible reasons why people would dislike this. Yeah. I think, yeah. Thanks for watching. I hope to do another stream like this again. I'm satisfied with the viewership numbers. And maybe I can, maybe this might be a new format where I just talk about a controversial Fire Emblem thing and just yap about it for a couple hours, and we just discuss it. Yeah. Thanks for watching, guys, and I guess I'll see you next on Tuesday. I think I'll probably I'll stream Last Promise again. But next week, I guess I'll try another topic like this. I'll make a bunch of slides and then we just talk. Did you guys like this format? It seems like a lot of people were interested in this stream. I don't actually. Some direct feedback would be nice. I guess if you're still around, it was pretty cool. Yeah, I think there's like a real lack of extended discussion about like all the facts for like one's particular thing, right? I guess this is kind of like a podcast now that I think about it. But I didn't want to call it a podcast because I feel like every Fire Emblem podcast has historically failed dramatically. So I don't want to associate it with that. Small enough that the chat actually works. Yeah, I think the chat rate, like the chat rate number of chatters is quite manageable. There's enough to actually have discussion. I was able to read most things as they came in. Yeah. Your complaint is that we didn't hear the other side. Why isn't the Blood Pact bad? Yeah, I guess the issue is that it's very easy to. I think most of the reasons why it's good are a matter of countering reasons why it's bad. So I guess I think I did a good job of like trying to accommodate other things about it. But I guess we didn't mostly talk about problems today. But I think our most controversial topics is mostly people having problems. But yeah, I think that's probably about it. Thanks for watching, guys, and see you on the next stream. Will there be a regular video of this? Possibly. I might need to make my own script, but I'll try to summarize the general thoughts here. I might make new slides too. But yeah, I think what was I gonna say? Yeah. See you in the next one. Bye. Oh yeah, remember to like and subscribe and write a comment about what you liked about it and do all that stuff to boost my engagement or something. I don't know, something like that. Actually, bye now.